So before I start seducing you to Austrian cuisine, let's maybe start with that other point, being feeling European. So what actually is that? Well, maybe we can start with this room. I'd like you to show me your hands. Who of you feels European? Right. I think there's not a single hand that's not up. That's not very surprising given the setting that we're in. But maybe when you think about your parents, the city where you grew up in, I don't know, your local supermarket, what do you think how many people would have raised their hands there? According to Eurobarometer, actually it varies quite a lot from country to country how many of us actually identify as Europeans, how many feel European. But as a matter of fact, we all live in Europe, and it doesn't mean that we all feel European. So when we look at Europe in the current status, we're actually facing quite a lot of big challenges, like migration, climate change, terrorism, social injustice, and so on. So all of these problems have one thing in common, which is they concern all of us. They don't just concern one country, but they concern all of us as a European community. But we won't be able to solve those problems if we don't actually feel that they concern all of us. We won't be able to solve those problems if we don't feel that we are this European community. So over the past decades, that is why, and that's like one of my main points, feeling European is not a nice to have anymore. Feeling European is crucial when it comes to actually solving our continent's problems. So when we look at the past decades, there have been several attempts in actually trying to create such a European spirit, mainly by European institutions. There are symbols like the flag, the anthem, or the Europe Day. It seemed like the idea was, let's create the institutions first, so that people will then slowly identify with them and feel European. The problem is, this doesn't seem to have worked all that well, because feelings are nothing that's created top-down with symbols that don't really resemble our lives. So maybe we should try it the other way around. Because if we feel European, we're far more likely to actually show interest in the EU as well, if we identify with it. Citizens won't be interested in European politics, economic developments, or even democratic participation if they don't feel European. There's this famous quote by Jacques Delors saying that no one will fall in love with a single market. But you might fall in love with Europe, and that would actually raise your interest in a single market. But how do you fall in love with Europe? Well, I would say do it a bit like you do it in real life. You probably first match. Then you kind of show interest in each other. You show up, you get to know each other. You maybe even make out, but you realize the beauty in each other. And that might sound a bit ridiculous, but to be quite frank, it's not. Emotions are not ridiculous, and they're not banal. They are our main driving force. So, to feel European first means get to know Europe, experience it, live it. But how can you experience Europe? Well, as a matter of fact, you can't. You can't experience Europe as a whole. You can't even go on holidays to Europe as a whole. If you want to experience Europe, you have to experience its pieces. You can go to Paris because you like French art, or to Italy because you like to practice your Italian. If you want to experience Europe, you have to experience its people, its cultures, and its countries and regions. That's why, to me, being European is not even all that much about being the same. It's quite a lot about being different. To me, being European is the ability to deal with those differences and actually have the willingness to see them as a chance rather than a threat. And this simply means get in contact with each other, because we also see what happens if we don't. In Germany, the right-wing AfD is the strongest in the areas that has the least foreigners. Or Orban's Hungary is actually the country that has the least exchange with other European Union member states. Taking this into account, it should make us worry that actually 190 million EU citizens have never left their own country. That's a third of EU members. That's why I want to tell you two stories about ideas that actually brought people together and that created this very personal exchange. And both emerged over a Wiener Schnitzel. So the first story started with a journey. It was the journey of Vincent and Martin. Some of you might even know them as Herr and Speer. They were back then two Berlin students in their mid-20s who just went on a train journey through Europe. Their idea was they wanted to get the European youth by themselves. So they visited 14 countries in 6 weeks, and the last stop was Vienna. Actually, on that day, it was also the first time that I met them. On the same day, they had dinner with Robert Menasse, an author, of course over a Wiener Schnitzel. And during that dinner, they told them, look, before we went on this trip, we felt like Europeans by school book. But after actually experiencing it, we felt like Europeans at heart. So the simple idea they had was actually every young European should have this possibility to experience that. And this is how the idea for Free Interrail was born. You're probably quite familiar with it. The idea is simple. On the 18th birthday, each young European should receive a letter by the European Commission granting them a 1-month free Interrail pass. They were inspired by this idea. They started writing about it. MEPs actually took it up, brought it to the European Commission, and this summer the first pilot took place. It's called Discover EU. Within 2 weeks, 100,000 young Europeans applied, and actually the first 15,000 could already go on a trip to Europe this summer. And there's a second application period coming up at the end of November for another 12,000 tickets. So if you know any 18-year-olds, tell them about this. I quite like, and even more impressive, I think, is that from 2021 on, the European Commission has said that they allocate 700 million euros for this project so that 1.5 billion youngsters can actually go on a European trip. And this all started because 2 guys felt European and they wanted to share this feeling. The second story starts with the Wiener Schnitzel as well. And this time it is my own journey that happened in 2002. I went on a European voluntary service in Spain, and that's actually me. And I lived in a flat with 8 people from 6 different countries, so a very typical l'auberge espagnole. Almost a decade later, I sat together with a friend of mine in a Viennese restaurant having, you guess, a Wiener Schnitzel, and we were talking about just that. Why do we feel European? And our answers were because we lived abroad, we had friends there, we learned languages, so it was very personal answers. And that brought us to the thought that not everyone has those personal experiences. So we thought, okay, if people don't go to Europe, why not bring Europe to where they are? And this is how we came up with the idea for Roots, the European journey in the middle of Vienna. Roots is a 1-day free event that lets people experience European countries in the middle of their city. So how it works is at the beginning we gather all participants in a local or in a central space. We divide them into groups. Each group has a guide that actually leads them to their stations. And they then go to 3 stations each, which represent European countries. So for instance, in Italy, they could learn Italian gestures. Or in Belgium, they could learn how to draw Smurfs. Or in Switzerland, because we also have non-EU member states, they could learn how to do a cheese fondue. Or in Poland, they could learn how to become a Polish ski jumper. In the end, we bring them all together and we show them that it's actually just that, this diversity that makes us all European. We first organized Roots in 2016, we repeated it in 2017 and in 2018. It won State Award on Europe in Austria, European Citizens Award. It had some 1,800 participants. And also, when we asked them, do you want to come again, 100% said they would want to. Quite a North Korean result. So it all still started with me and a friend sitting together and actually asking ourselves, why do we feel European? So both those stories show that real people contact is essential in order to feel European. And it might actually be exactly this feeling that makes you open and makes you more interested in European institutions. And I think this personal and institutional identity together is the basis for cooperation and peace. That's why the personal level counts, and this is where it all starts. Without it, rational institutions are not going to work. The personal level is still the basis for the work of the European Union also to work. That's why I think we have to take this personal approach seriously. Because to be honest, so far it's not exactly the highest on the agenda of politicians. Its relevance still has to be acknowledged. And we have to work on this, because a European identity, European feeling is not something that emerges overnight. No one is going to go on a train trip from Vienna to Bratislava and feel European. But if they take a 1-month trip through Europe, well, the chances are higher. And no one's going to show up to Roots for once and then wake up as a passionate European next day. But if events like this actually happen on a regular basis, we will become more open to the European diversity that's surrounding us on a daily basis. I think it's important to think long-term, and for that we need corporations. And we need a lot of people to get involved. We need citizens like me, like Vincent, like Martin, like you. Of course, we need politicians, but I also think we need one stakeholder that hasn't been really that active so far, which is the economy. So what we actually ask for is a corporate European responsibility. Because businesses have a very pro-European approach and they're quite interested in the EU to continue existing, but they haven't really shown that much responsibility. This is where my cupcake comes into play. Because one last initiative that I want to present just quickly was founded just 2 weeks ago in an event where there were lots and lots of cupcakes. And in the end, we were so busy with actually setting up a new organization that we didn't have time for the buffet like here, so we ate cupcakes all day long. This event was the BMW Foundation, the Munich Forum. And that was actually the end point of European tables that the foundation has had over the entire year. And one of the outcomes of this European roundtable was Alliance for Europe. So here you see the founding team. The idea of Alliance for Europe is simple as well. We all know that there are lots of pro-European NGOs, initiatives, organizations out there. Problem is, they're all very scattered, they're not very well connected, they don't really speak with one voice, which, to be quite honest, the right wing does much better, and mostly they're underfunded. So what Alliance for Europe wants to do is actually connect this pro-European landscape and professionalize them, help them to build a stronger network, create one voice, especially with the European elections coming up, and also raise fundings, because it might be easier for businesses to actually support the simple message that they are pro-European instead of supporting political parties or supporting small-scale projects where they couldn't really justify it that well. So Alliance for Europe was incorporated in October. It's based, it's got its headquarters in Munich, and its urgent and immediate goal is actually to ensure a pro-European majority in the upcoming elections in May. If you want to get involved or support it, or if you know CEOs at businesses that feel European, because also there it boils down to people. If you have people who feel European, who are convinced that this is important, you will be far more likely to actually get them on board. So thinking back about the hands that were raised at the beginning when I asked them who feels European, the question that I want to leave you with is, why do you feel European? Maybe your answers are personal, maybe they are emotional, like mine, or like the one of Vincent and Martin, or like the one of the 25 shareholders who invested their personal money in Alliance for Europe. And I actually believe that these are the best stories. These are the ones that we can connect to. These are the ones that people like to listen to. So I encourage you to simply go out there and share your stories and ask each other and get in contact. And as an Austrian, I might add the humble recommendation, do it over a Wiener Schnitzel, because you never know what kind of ideas might come out of that. Thank you.